Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. I am Kat Hobson, your host, and I am joined by Mary A. Joyce, who is someone I really greatly admire and whose work just fascinates me. And Mary, we were discussing Antarctica, and I know that also under your global links, there was the writing by Admiral Byrd, who was quite shaken from his time down there, wasn't he?
He has two diaries, and the first diary many people are familiar with, and then he had a secret diary, which he just kept to himself, and he wasn't sure if it would ever be released. And I got a copy of it, and he describes going into like the inner Earth in the Arctic, and what he saw, and it gets almost to the point of sounding like science fiction.
It does.
It really does, because he talks about how he gets in there, and I kind of scoot over that part pretty much, but suddenly from being where it's all ice and snow, he suddenly sees a green valley, and he's flying into the interior of the Earth, and he calls it a paradise inside the Earth. And he had an audience with somebody who was introduced to him as the master. So I actually have quoted from that. I can't really summarize it very well, but if people are interested in what he experienced when he was in there, we're still in the same section of the website. It's Global Links for 2018, which is just this past year. So there's three things on that page. One is the story about Admiral Byrd going into the interior of the Earth. The second one is the newly found entrance that you and I have just been talking about. And then if you keep scrolling down, there's a third one, and it's called Unknown Object Flees Disaster in Antarctica. And visually, it looks like there's been an avalanche on Antarctica. And so you know what that looks like. This is a big rush of ice or snow. And then there's this track from a vehicle, and this vehicle just goes zipping out from what I will call an avalanche. It looks like it's trying to escape. And when I did the measuring techniques that you can use when you're on Google Earth, the vehicle itself is about 200 feet long. So that's some major stuff going on down there. And so those, just go to 2018 for Global Links, and you'll find those three articles that are all about Antarctica.
I'm going to shift gears on you again.
Yeah, go right ahead.
You have a lecture coming up on Bigfoot, and you've been writing about the various types of Bigfoot. What are you finding? Are they actual separate species? Are they just like, minor differences?
I very much believe in the research that Dr. Melba Ketchum has done. She's taken a lot of heat, a lot of abuse from the professionals in her field who, don't want to embrace these kind of ideas. But after taking a lot of heat, there have been other scientists who have also confirmed what she has found. And what she found was that the Bigfoot is a mixture of, on the mother's side, it's human, and on the paternal side, it's some kind of an unknown creature that isn't in any of the registers that they have for, supposedly everything that's living on the earth. The maternal DNA you can get very, very easily, but in order to get the paternal DNA, which would determine what really makes the Bigfoot unique, you have to have the nuclear DNA, and that either comes from like the hair follicle itself, or, in some way or another, you have to be able to get the nuclear DNA, and that's harder to come by.
Well, I know that there were issues with that relevant even to the Star Child skull, that it's very easy to determine one and not the other. So if the maternal side is human, then that opens up a whole nother question relevant to where did they come from? Where did they, how did they originate? And
Uh, I think this Earth is truly a big experimental mixing bowl, and I think some of it's just happened through, two species being close enough that they can actually reproduce together, to genetic manipulation. I think both things have gone on.
I think so too. And I have been hearing, because I investigate and do all these odd readings and other things. There's been an awful lot of conjecture relevant to flashes of light, and then people experience a Bigfoot, or they're encountering one and there's a flash of light and it's gone. So now people are considering the possibility of these type things being interdimensional. Are they just
There's tons of reports that come to that conclusion. It's certainly difficult to prove, and
yes?
how you'd have to catch it with, you'd have to be a credible witness with a credible piece of camera equipment to catch it when it happens, in order to have the kind of proof that would be necessary to convince a lot of people. But you certainly do get a lot of firsthand accounts of that nature. Another thing that I learned was that I read a book which I would not have probably ever picked up and read if somebody hadn't had a very unique experience. And here in Western North Carolina, where we have both the UFO and the Bigfoot phenomena going on in the same area, the idea that there might be a connection, seems to be somewhat supported. And these two witnesses who have had those experiences, they were out one night, out in the woods where these things were happening, and they saw these gigantic owls. Now, when I say gigantic, I mean they were described as having a wingspan of like 8 feet. I
That
had
is
somebody
huge for an owl.
I had somebody measure my arm stretched out from fingertip to fingertip, and it came out about 5.5 feet. So it would be 2.5 feet beyond my wingspan. So we're talking huge. Now that is interesting. That's number one thing that makes it interesting. Second thing is the man had a very strong spotlight, and he shined it right into the eyes of the owl, and there was no reflection. It was just these black eyes with no reflection, and neither of them had ever seen owls like this. And if I remember correctly, they saw like 6 or 8 just flying around them. Well, because of them, I read this book called I think it's simply called The Messengers, or The Messenger, and it's about owls and the UFO abduction phenomena. And you will hear from many sources that people who've been abducted, their memories get tampered with so that they don't remember what actually happened to them, and they'll come back with false memories to cover up what actually happened. And apparently the owl image is rather common with the abduction experience. So you just have to wonder about those things.
Well, you do. I was actually reading today separately that normal owls, it was relevant to Mothman, but the normal owls, the largest they're known to get, are 5.5 foot wingspans, and that their eyes are so reflective that the people that were in West Virginia who had the initial experiences and were panicking, one of the instances related that the creature kept up with them as they were trying to escape it going into town. It stayed with them when they hit 80 miles an hour, which is saying something. But
Right.
there were also Green Berets who were possibly, doing night drops in that area when these sightings were occurring. And if they had like 1950s night vision goggles, they may have been seen as glowing. I don't know about red, but anyway, owls have something to do with all of this stuff. I just find that fascinating too, and I've been trying to find connections to understand this. But I know that with all of the monsters that have been reported in that area, I had a very interesting conversation last week with a gentleman who is over in Braxton County, West Virginia, relevant to the Flatwoods monster, which also had, it appeared 7 feet tall. It was, red glowing eyes, different clothing, which would not fit a Green Beret, but, could have been a parachute maybe. But it was just interesting to see the correlations between all of these different experiences and everything be called a monster.
Yeah, I hear you.
So I know that you probably experience a lot more of that than I do, but I think we both find our share of interesting reporting on these things.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't want to try to match you head for head on that.
Oh, you would probably win. You've been doing this longer. But it's interesting. There's so many people who have so many different experiences, and people mock and ridicule them, and yet they're still coming out.
What happens is if people keep coming forward, if you begin to hear similar stories from people who have no contact with each other, that is a type of clarification that there might be truth to it. I mean, sometimes we have to get our proof by piling up the evidence rather than just one thing. But when it piles up pretty high, you can't just blow it all away. You have to at least keep your mind open to the possibility of the possibilities.
And be willing to go the extra mile and check it out yourself if there's an opportunity to do so.
This is kind of related. It's not really about monsters, but one of the books that I've done is called Cherokee Little People Were Real. And I started in researching and interviewing witnesses about this back in 2000. And it wasn't until, I think, 2017, or maybe the summer, not that long ago, that we finally got a picture that I think very well could be a little person.
That's a great image.
That's a long time to wait for something. But again,
yes.
You know which one I'm talking about?
I do.
Okay, but for your audience, basically what it is, a couple that I know who live up at the top of a high ridge. It's a single-lane dirt road to get to their place, and they have a game cam at their entrance to their little road. And something triggered it. I think it was a bird in the foreground that triggered the camera to go off. And there's this figure off in the woods. It's little, and it appears to be nude. It appears to be the backside of a person. So here's what we did. The couple went and the man went over to where they saw the figure, and he kept crouching down until he was the same height as the little creature appeared in the film. And then he measured it, and I think it was like 3 feet 2 inches or 3 feet 3 inches. So that gave you an idea of the size of the little person. And then they thought, well, maybe they were just seeing a spirit or a ghost. And what I did at that point was I took the picture of the little person and I turned up the contrast to extreme contrast so that anything that's living, a human being that's alive or an animal that's alive, will go into a magenta color range. Then I did the same thing with a number of known ghost photos. In the ghost images, they stay ghost-like. They do not turn magenta. But with this little figure, it went magenta. And in one picture, there is a ghost with a child a real live child in the same photo. The child went magenta and the ghost didn't. So this indicated to us that this little creature was indeed alive.
Fascinating. Have you had your own experience with a little person?
No, I haven't. I've talked to and interviewed